One sip from the lost spring, and the human's fate was no longer his own. The awakening. The ancient stones whispered their secrets as Kieran Thorne's flashlight beam danced across their weathered faces. 3 months of searching had brought him to this hidden valley in the Himalayas, where legends spoke of a temple that vanished and reappeared with the cycles of the moon. As an archaeologist with a reputation for finding the unfindable, Kieran had laughed off the mystical aspects but couldn't ignore the historical accounts that all pointed to this location. "This is it," he murmured, brushing away centuries of growth to reveal symbols that matched his research. Unlike his colleagues who chased fame through museum exhibitions, Kieran sought knowledge in its purest form, untouched, undisturbed history. His tall frame bent double as he squeezed through a narrow passage, the weight of his pack scraping against the stone ceiling. The passage opened to a chamber that defied explanation. Unlike the rough exterior, these walls were perfectly smooth, adorned with constellations unknown to modern astronomy. Kieran's breath caught as he recognized the craftsmanship, too precise for the tools of the era this temple supposedly belonged to. In the center of the chamber lay a small spring, its waters glowing with a soft blue luminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. Kieran's rational mind sought scientific explanations, bioluminescent organisms, mineral properties, but found none satisfactory. 3 days of careful documentation had left him parched. His water supplies ran low, and the nearest stream was hours away. The spring's water looked impossibly clear, and tests had shown no contaminants. Scientific curiosity warred with caution as he knelt beside it. "Just one sip," he reasoned, cupping his hands. The water felt cool against his palms, but strangely warm against his lips. It tasted of starlight and forgotten dreams, thoughts that Kieran immediately chided himself for. Water couldn't taste of abstractions. The change was subtle at first, a humming beneath his skin, a whisper in his mind that wasn't his own. When he looked up, he was no longer alone. She stood before him like a vision from another world. Her skin glowed with a soft purple radiance that illuminated the chamber, highlighting sharp cheekbones and eyes of liquid silver. She wore simple clothing that seemed woven from moonlight itself, and when she moved, it was with the fluid grace of water. "You have awakened me," she said, her voice like distant chimes. "I am Nisa, guardian of the astral spring." Kieran stumbled backward, years of scientific training failing him completely. Who are you?" "You drank from the spring," Nisa said, a note of sadness in her voice. "Our fates are now intertwined." She reached forward, and Kieran felt an invisible connection between them, a thread that pulled at something deep within his chest. "That's impossible," he whispered, but he could feel it, her presence in his mind, her emotions brushing against his own. "The spring binds those who drink from it to its guardian," Nisa explained, taking a tentative step forward. "I have waited for centuries, bound by ancient law to remain until one came who would share my fate." "Undo it," Kieran demanded, panic rising. "I didn't consent to this, whatever this is." Nisa's silver eyes reflected his fear. "Neither did I, human. Neither did I." In the silence that followed, Kieran realized something strange. He could feel her fear mirroring his own, but beneath it lay centuries of loneliness so profound it made his heart ache. Without thinking, he reached out, his fingers stopping just short of her luminous skin. "My name is Kieran," he said softly. "Kieran Thorne." Nisa's expression softened. "The binding cannot be undone, Kieran Thorne, but perhaps it can be understood." She mirrored his gesture, her hand hovering near his. When their fingers finally touched, a spark jumped between them and images flooded Kieran's mind. Stars, vast and ancient. Civilizations rising and falling. And through it all, Nisa, watching, waiting. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Now," she replied, "we learn to carry each other's fates." As moonlight filtered through cracks in the ancient ceiling, Kieran realized that the discovery he'd sought was not the temple itself, but something far more profound and terrifying. His life was no longer entirely his own, and neither was hers. Whatever came next, they would face it together, whether they chose to or not. A revelation morning light filtered through the tent canvas, waking Kieran from fitful dreams of endless stars. For a moment, he believed yesterday had been a hallucination brought on by altitude sickness, until he turned and found Nisa sitting cross-legged at the tent's entrance, her purple skin catching the dawn light like polished amethyst. You require sleep, she observed. I had forgotten how much time mortals spend unconscious. Kieran rubbed his eyes. And you don't? Not as you do. I rest in meditation. She tilted her head, studying him. Your emotions were turbulent while you slept. I felt them through our bond, the bond. It wasn't his imagination then, this invisible tether connecting them. As if to confirm his thoughts, he felt a gentle curiosity that wasn't his own brushing against his consciousness. We need to talk about this, Kieran said, sitting up. Properly. They descended from the mountain that day, Nisa drawing curious glances from the few herders they passed. Kieran explained her appearance away as a skin condition, though he suspected the locals knew better. Their respectful distance and subtle gestures of warding told their own story. At a secluded tea house in a village clinging to the mountainside, Nissa revealed her truth. I was not born of your world, she began, her silver eyes reflecting the steam from her untouched tea. My people are travelers among the stars. Where your kind sees points of light in the night sky, we see doorways. Kieran listened, anthropologists' instincts battling with scientific skepticism. You're saying you're not human. I am what your legends might call a star being. Her fingers traced patterns on the wooden table. Centuries ago, I committed a transgression against my people. I shared knowledge with humans that was forbidden to share. My punishment was to guard the spring until one came who would drink willingly and share my sentence. That's hardly fair, Kieran protested. A sad smile touched Nissa's lips. Justice and fairness are not always the same. Kieran Thorne. She explained the nature of their bond, a connection of life force that allowed them to sense each other's emotions, share physical sensations, and prevented separation. If they strayed too far apart, pain would drive them back together. So I'm your prisoner, Kieran concluded bitterly. Nissa's hurt flashed through their bond before she could conceal it. We are each other's keepers now. I have been bound to that spring for 500 of your years. You have freed me from that prison, though you've placed us both in another. The realization humbled him. Whatever freedom he'd lost, she'd gained after centuries of solitude. In Kathmandu, they rented a small apartment with the last of Kieran's expedition funds. The city's chaos provided anonymity as they learned to navigate their new reality. Kieran watched Nissa discover humanity, her wonder at street food. Music and crowded markets flowed through their bond, softening his resentment. One evening, as monsoon rains drummed against the windows, Nissa placed a hand over her heart, then reached toward Kieran's chest, stopping inches away. There is something you should know, she said, her voice solemn. The binding can be broken. Kieran's heart leapt. How? A choice must be made freely, with full understanding of its cost. Either I must surrender my immortality and become as you are, or I become immortal. Kieran asked. Nissa shook her head. You would become as I am. No longer human, but something other. In either case, one of us must sacrifice what makes us who we are. As lightning illuminated her face, Kieran realized he no longer saw her as alien. Through their bond, he'd glimpsed the person beneath the purple skin and silver eyes, someone lonely, wise, and unexpectedly vulnerable. Is there no other way? He asked softly. None that I know, she replied. But perhaps that is why we journey together, to discover if another path exists. That night, as Nissa meditated by the window, Kieran felt something shift in their bond. No longer just a tether of obligation, but the first fragile threads of genuine connection. The pursuit. The men came at midnight, their movements too precise to be local authorities. Kieran woke to Nissa's alarm pulsing through their bond seconds before the apartment door splintered. They've found us, she whispered, pulling him toward the window. The Seekers. They fled across rooftops slick with monsoon rain, the city lights blurring beneath them. Nissa moved with preternatural grace while Kieran relied on adrenaline and her guidance through their bond. Only when they'd lost their pursuers in the labyrinthine streets did Kieran demand answers. They are a society that has hunted knowledge of the springs for centuries, Nissa explained as they huddled in the shadow of a temple. They believe drinking from all 7 springs grants godhood. Your world has many who desire power at any cost. 7 springs. There are more like you. 6 others scattered across your world. We were all sentenced for similar transgressions. Rain streaked down her purple skin like tears. They will not stop hunting us, Kieran. The bond between us is proof the springs are real. They traveled south through India by train, bus, and sometimes on foot. Kieran used his archaeological contacts to stay ahead of their pursuers, while Nissa learned to disguise her appearance with clothing and cosmetics. Their shared danger forged a deeper understanding between them. In a crowded sleeper train crossing the Central Plains, pressed together in a narrow berth, Kieran felt Nissa's consciousness brush against his own more deliberately than before. "May I show you something?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the train's rhythm. When he nodded, she placed her palms against his temples. Suddenly, he was seeing through her eyes. Not just human vision, but layers of energy and light he had no words for. The passengers around them glowed with auras of emotion and intent. The train itself a complex web of forces. "This is how I see your world," she whispered. When the vision faded, Kieran stared at her in wonder. "Thank you for sharing that." Something shifted between them. Trust where there had been wariness. In the ancient port city of Kochi, they found temporary sanctuary with a professor emeritus who specialized in astronomical anomalies in ancient texts. While he helped them research the spring's curse, Nissa and Kieran explored the city, their shared experiences building a bridge between their differences. On a sunset beach, Nissa confessed her growing conflict. "I have watched your kind for centuries but never understood you until now," she said, her feet leaving purple prints in the wet sand. "Your lives are so brief, yet you feel everything so intensely." "Is it different for your people?" Kieran asked, fascinated. "We experience time differently. Emotions are considered carefully over decades." She looked at him, silver eyes reflecting the dying sun. "But through our bond, I feel as you do. It is overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying." That night, as they walked through a local festival, their hands brushed accidentally. The contact sent a spark through their bond that left them both breathless. Neither spoke of it, but something had awakened between them that transcended their magical connection. Their research revealed a disturbing truth. No bonded pair had ever successfully broken the curse. All had tried, but the texts spoke only of tragedy. Pairs who chose mortality withered and died, while those who chose immortality lost their humanity entirely, becoming something cold and detached. "There must be another way," Kieran insisted, his hand finding Nissa's across the table. The touch was deliberate this time, his fingers interlacing with hers. "Perhaps," she agreed, her hope warming their bond. "But we must hurry. The seekers draw closer, and there is one who might help us, another guardian who once faced the same choice." As they prepared to leave Kochi, Kieran realized his feelings for Nissa had grown beyond the bond's artificial connection. What had begun as resentment had transformed into something he wasn't ready to name, something that made the prospect of either losing her or changing himself seem equally impossible. "Whatever happens," he promised, as they boarded a night train bound for the interior. "We'll face it together." Nissa's smile contained centuries of solitude and newfound hope. "Together," she agreed, and through their bond, Kieran felt the word's true meaning, no longer a sentence, but a choice they were both beginning to make freely. The choice. The ancient temple complex of Mahabalipuram rose from the coastal plain like the skeleton of a forgotten dream. Salt air mingled with incense as Kieran and Nissa made their way through crowds of tourists and pilgrims, following coordinates hidden within astronomical calculations from the professor's research. "She is here," Nissa whispered, her senses extending beyond human perception. "I can feel her presence, another like me." They found the entrance at sunset, a narrow passage visible only when the dying light struck a particular carved panel. Inside, cool darkness enveloped them, broken only by bioluminescent fungi that cast an eerie blue glow across stone floors worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. At the chamber's heart stood a woman arranging flowers around a small, dry basin. Her skin was the deep green of forest shadows, her eyes like pools of amber. When she turned, ancient recognition passed between her and Nissa. "I am Thara," she said, her voice carrying the rustle of leaves and wind. "Guardian of the Earth Spring. You have traveled far to find me." "We seek answers about the bond," Kieran explained. Thara's amber gaze studied their connected auras. "So I see. You are not the first to come seeking release from your fate, but you may be the first to have a chance." She invited them to sit beside her dormant spring, explaining that her waters flowed only during certain celestial alignments. Over the centuries, she had bonded with a human, chosen mortality, and watched him die of old age. Yet the curse had not claimed her as the legends foretold. How is that possible? Nisa asked, hope brightening their bond. The texts speak only of tragedy for those who make such choices. Because the curse is not what you believe it to be, Thara replied. It is not punishment but lesson. When I was sentenced, I believed humans to be lesser beings, unworthy of our knowledge. My bonded one taught me otherwise. Kieran leaned forward. You're saying the purpose of the bond is to teach selfless love. Thara touched the dry basin reverently. The ancients who sentenced us believed we could only truly understand other beings by being bound to them by sharing their fate completely, but the sacrifice becoming mortal or immortal, Nisa began. Thara's laugh was gentle as spring rain. The choice itself is the key, not the outcome. When my human chose to sacrifice his mortality to spare me pain, and I simultaneously chose mortality to grant him freedom, the curse recognized true selflessness. We were both transformed, but differently than expected. Through their bond, Kieran felt Nisa's emotions surge, confusion, hope, and something deeper that quickened his own heartbeat. Stay with me tonight, Thara offered. The Seekers dare not approach this sanctuary. Tomorrow I will tell you more. In the privacy of the simple guest chamber, Kieran and Nisa faced each other in the moonlight filtering through ancient stone lattices. If Thara speaks truly, Nisa said, her silver eyes searching his, then our fate depends not on what we sacrifice, but on why we choose to sacrifice it. Kieran took her hands in his, marveling at how natural it felt now. I think I understand. The curse tests whether we're willing to give up what matters most to us, for each other. The realization hung between them, charged with implication. Their bond hummed with unspoken emotion, layers of connection that had grown far beyond their initial tether. Kieran, Nisa whispered, I need to know. If you had the choice now, would you still wish to break our bond? Instead of answering, Kieran raised his hand to her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. Through their connection, she felt his answer before he spoke it. No, he said softly, not anymore. The admission broke something open between them. Months of shared experiences, danger, and growing affection crystallized into certainty. When their lips met, the bond between them flared like a supernova, amplifying each sensation until neither could tell where one ended and the other began. That night, as they explored each other's bodies with reverent curiosity, their connection deepened beyond the magical to something profoundly human. Nisa's purple skin glowed faintly in the darkness as Kieran's hands mapped constellations across her form. Through their bond, she experienced the intensity of human passion, while he glimpsed the cosmic perspective of her immortal existence. In the quiet aftermath, wrapped in each other's arms, they faced the truth they'd been avoiding. I would give up immortality to stay with you, Nisa confessed, her head resting against his chest. And I would give up my humanity to spare you that loss, Kieran replied. The paradox of their situation settled around them like the ancient stones of their sanctuary. Tomorrow Thara would tell them more, but tonight they held each other. Two beings from different worlds who had found something worth sacrificing everything for. What neither said aloud was the fear that clutched their hearts, that even with this newfound understanding, the choice ahead might still tear them apart. Transformation dawn broke in shades of gold and crimson as Kieran and Nisa sought Thara for her promised guidance. But the green-skinned guardian was gone, leaving only a cryptic message carved freshly into stone. The true spring lies where your journey began. Trust what you have learned. It's a trap, Kieran realized, sensing the danger through their heightened bond. The Seekers found her. They're driving us back to Nepal. Or it's the final test, Nisa countered, her silver eyes determined. Either way, we must return to the astral spring. They traveled north with renewed urgency, their connection stronger after their night together. Through crowded train stations and mountain passes, they moved as one, their bond now a strength rather than a burden. When they touched, even briefly, both felt the resonance of their shared emotions, fear, hope, and the deepening love neither could deny. In a remote village a day's journey from the spring, they received warning from an unexpected ally. The professor from Kochi had tracked their movements and sent word that the Seekers had surrounded the temple ruins. They'll be waiting for us, Kieran, said as they prepared for the final approach under cover of darkness. Nisa's purple fingers intertwined with his. Together, she reminded him. Always, he promised. The mountain temple lay bathed in unnatural light. The Seekers had established a research camp around it, their equipment violating the sacred space. Kieran and Nisa watched from the shadows as white-coated figures moved between stations, armed guards patrolling the perimeter. "They've been studying the spring," Nisa whispered, horror flowing through their bond. "Trying to replicate its properties. Through careful observation, they identified the leader, a silver-haired woman whose clinical precision masked fanatical purpose." "Director Ravel," Kieran murmured, recognizing her from archaeological conferences. Brilliant mind, dangerous ambition. Their infiltration began at midnight, using Nisa's perception of energy flows to navigate between motion sensors and guards. They had nearly reached the inner chamber when alarms shattered the night's silence. "Run," Kieran urged, pulling Nisa toward the spring's chamber as guards converged from all directions. They reached the glowing waters moments before their pursuers, the blue luminescence pulsing like a frightened heart. Director Ravel entered last, flanked by armed guards, her expression triumphant. "The bonded pair returns," she announced. "How convenient that you've brought the spring's guardian back to us. We've learned much from our studies, but a living specimen will accelerate our work considerably." "You don't understand what you're tampering with," Kieran warned, positioning himself protectively before Nisa. Ravel's smile was cold. "On the contrary, Dr. Thorne, we understand perfectly. 7 springs, 7 guardians, each holding a fragment of power meant for beings far greater than these alien prisoners." She gestured dismissively at Nisa. "The ancients hid their technology in plain sight, disguised as myth. We intend to reclaim it." Through their bond, Kieran and Nisa communicated without words, forming a desperate plan. As Ravel approached, speaking of containment protocols and extraction procedures, they backed toward the spring until they stood at its edge. "The choice must be made freely, with full understanding of its cost," Nisa whispered, echoing the terms of their bond. Kieran nodded, his resolve matching hers. In one fluid motion, they turned toward each other, hands clasped between them. "I choose to surrender my humanity," Kieran declared, loud enough for all to hear. "Not for power, but so that you might remain who you are." Simultaneously, Nisa proclaimed, "I choose mortality not as punishment, but as gift, to share the precious brevity that makes human life beautiful." The spring's waters surged upward, enveloping them in a column of luminescent blue. Through their bond, Kieran felt Nisa's essence intertwining with his own, stars and earth, immortality and fleeting life, 2 beings choosing sacrifice for love rather than gain. The Seekers fell back in alarm as the light intensified, washing the chamber in blinding radiance. Within the column, Kieran and Nisa held each other as transformation racked their bodies. He felt his consciousness expanding beyond human limits, while she experienced the sharp focus of mortality. Yet neither became fully what the other had been. When the light receded, they stood changed but whole. Kieran's skin now held a subtle luminescence, while Nisa's purple complexion had warmed with human vitality. Both felt the difference immediately. They existed between worlds now, neither fully human nor star being. Director Ravel approached cautiously. "What happened?" "What have you become?" "Free," Kieran answered simply. The spring's waters receded into the earth, its glow fading to ordinary transparency. The bond between Kieran and Nisa remained, but transformed, no longer a tether of obligation, but a connection chosen and cherished. "The spring has fulfilled its purpose," Nisa explained, addressing not Ravel but the shocked Seekers behind her. "There is no power for you to claim here." The springs were never about power, they were about understanding. As if to confirm her words, the temple began to shake, ancient stones shifting and settling. The Seekers fled as the ceiling began to collapse, but Kieran and Nisa stood unafraid at the spring's edge. "It's returning to the stars," Nisa said, watching the water spiral upward through the crumbling roof. "Its work is complete." Hand in hand, they walked from the ruins under a sky brilliant with stars. Their transformed bodies hummed with new potential, neither bound by mortality nor isolated by immortality, but balanced between worlds. "What now?" Kieran asked as they crested the ridge overlooking the valley, the collapsed temple a shadow behind them. Nisa's smile contained both ancient wisdom and newfound joy. Now we choose our own fate. There are other springs, other guardians who might be shown another way. A worthy journey, Kiran agreed, drawing her close. Above them a star flared brighter for a moment, acknowledging the rare outcome of the ancient test. Two beings who had proven that connection transcended difference, that love could transform rather than diminish, and that the greatest power came not from control but from the willingness to let go. As dawn touched the mountains with gentle light, Kiran and Nisa began their descent, no longer prisoner and guardian, human and alien, but companions who had chosen each other across the vast gulf of stars and species. Their story had begun with a single sip from a magical spring, but it would continue through their own choice, written across the earth and sky by two hearts that beat as one.